You ever wondered how to start a hotshot business with no money? That's what we're going to hit. As entrepreneurs and business owners, we know that if we have a clear plan, anything becomes possible. And if you can have a clear plan, a clear process to create that plan, and a way to create clarity with your partner or spouse, you can drive to amazing heights. So if you're looking to start a hotshot business with no money, tell you what, it is possible. And we're going to go through and we'll talk about it. I started my first of 16 companies when I was 19. I have built them, bought them, sold them, and wrecked a couple. I've helped hundreds and hundreds of people all over the world start, build, and scale their businesses. And these processes and these techniques are very common, and there's ways to do this. There's a few people that have built massive companies with these basic ideas. But the 4 basic steps are going to be, first, you got to do your research. Second, you're going to have to create some sort of relationship or contract in advance. Third, you're going to have to actually get your funding, and we'll talk about multiple ways you can do that. And then lastly, how can you actually build a business and execute it? So to start with, what do we mean by talking about when I say doing your research? I spend a lot of time in my book and in the courses. You can learn more about what we do at aspiringsolopreneur.com. But as you go through this, starting and researching, what are your motivations? Why are you doing this? And if it's just money, that's not necessarily a bad reason. But if that's all you're chasing, unless you're a drug dealer or you work for Goldman Sachs, it's probably not going to be the ideal fit. So thinking about what it is, if it's more around, I want to be in control of my own life, I like the flexibility, I like the money, and I don't mind being on call and I'm accountable, okay, great. But being clear on what your motivations are. And then the second is doing a lot of the research on what's it take in your local community to start this business. So in some places, you may have to have special licenses. Okay, fair enough. You may have to have certain insurance, bonding, but find out what that is. Now you can do this, and again, we talk about it in other videos on this channel, but also in this book, on where you go to find those things. And you can start by going in and seeing who does licensing, who else is doing it, and start talking with them. Remember, you've got 2 ears, 1 mouth. You can listen twice as much as you speak. You have the ability to learn a lot. When you do the right kind of research and you dig in and really figure out what it is, you're going to start to build a roadmap. And in fact, that's one of the main things we talk about in a lot of the other channels, or our other videos on this channel, is how to do all this research while you're still employed someplace else, while you're learning about these things. So that when you do decide to transition, you're going to be in a very, very solid spot. So the next thing, once you start to figure out, okay, yeah, this is a plausible business. I can do this. I know that I'm going to need to have this kind of research and these pieces. That's a start. That's great. But if you don't have the money and you need to get the right rig or certain type of licenses, there may be some components with that. Now, in the hotshot business, that's something that if you can pass the background checks, get the insurance, if you can do the securities, like if you're doing ATF stuff, some places, again, in the oil fields, if you're in a fracking space, being able to transport the bazooka, the explosives, you're going to have a certain licensure that allows you to do that. Now, if you go through and you figure that out, I'm going to backstep here half a step. If that's the case, what you may choose to do is go and see if you can work for somebody else who's already doing it, or some other company that has a similar kind of thing, and maybe they'll pay for you to get your certifications or for you to get the different licensing that you need that'll be attached to you as a person. Now, this will make you more valuable to them, but it also means that they will be paying for you to get that education. It may take a little bit of time, but that's okay. If you can come out of that while you're doing it, say, wow, I need to have these 4 licenses, and maybe it's hazardous materials, maybe it's certain bondings, what are those things? But figure out what it is you need. So we start with that research. Then the second thing is to go out and start exploring who may need your services. Now, you're going to be able to figure this out again by doing your research, but you may actually be able to go to some existing companies that run hotshot businesses and say, hey, look, I would love to be a contractor for you. And maybe you don't get the full rate with them that you would charge, but you get a good chunk of that. But they're willing to say, yeah, and for our overflow work, we would love to have you. And they may even be willing to give you a contract that says contingent upon A, B, and C. But it says we'll do this. If you can also go out and find other companies that are looking to have you, to hire you, provided you get these things done, fair enough, that helps. So if you've defined what it is you need, then you go out and you find the business and the people that want it, great. Well, once you have that contract, depending on how tight the contract is and depending on your market, you may even be able to ask for an advance and say, look, I'd love to do this, but I tell you what, I will do a non-refundable, or I will do a guaranteed refundable advance. You give me an advance and I'm gonna go out and lease this piece of equipment. Or I'm gonna go get this contract, or I'll do these, or not contract, but licensure or bonding or things like that. Now, they may not like that, but some companies will do that. There was somebody who built a big software as a service company, ended up being a multi-billion-dollar company. He did that with the government, and the government actually paid for things in advance. So you never know what you're gonna get until you ask. So once you have that contract, you can potentially ask for an advance. Now, in some cases, depending on how tight the contract is and the market and what your own personal credit score looks like, you may actually be able to go to the bank and say, look, I have these licenses, boom, 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 boom. I know that I need to buy this, this, this. I need this insurance, this licensing, this piece here. And this company, Schlumberger, BJ Services, whoever, Halliburton, is giving me an agreement that they'll pay me this once I get this done. It isn't a guarantee, but it certainly happens at certain times. And if you may have other pieces of collateral, you may have a home, you may have other pieces, you may be able to say, look, I'll use this, talk to your partner or your spouse about this, as collateral to get me the cash to get it started. Now, the other thing is that you may, and again, let me back up with this with the spouse. If you're talking to your spouse about this and you have the contract here and you have all the information here because you've done your research, it's like a no-brainer, this is what I do, we can just make 4 times as much. That turns into a no-brainer. Like, yeah, and your partner's gonna be a lot more comfortable with that. So the next thing is you can potentially talk to investors, and investors may be friends and family. But usually you wanna make sure it's such a no-brainer before you go and ask for somebody to help you with this. Now the last way is you can do, there's lots of traditional financing places out there for vehicles, for sometimes you can even finance insurance. Sometimes you can put things on credit cards. I've built businesses on credit cards. I would not recommend doing that because the sleepless nights are a big pain in the butt. I was able to get through it and it worked out, but not the smartest thing that I ever did. But, and again, in the book and on the courses, we talk about a whole litany of different ways that you can finance things. Once you've defined that, hey, no questions asked, this is a no-brainer. So once you've done that and you're starting to finance it, well, now we really need to make sure that we build the business correctly. And especially in a hotshot business, you've got some pretty big financial exposure and liability exposure. So making sure, and I usually recommend you start with a small business accountant, but in this case, you may start talking with an expert small business insurance company and find out what are the absolute things I have to have, like, holy smokes, I'm gonna get in trouble if I don't have these. And the contracts may even stipulate it. The things, yeah, I should have, I don't have to, but I'd be kind of an idiot if I don't. And the things that are nice to have. And this is gonna help you to start to figure out what the pieces are with that. That small business insurance person is likely gonna be able to refer you to a small business accountant who can help you on the right structures. What are the things I'm gonna need to do for compliance, other components. You can then lead to maybe a small business attorney who can say, yeah, what do I need to do from a structure? Do I need to build this as a subchapter S corporation? Is this as an LLC? What are the different ways to do that in the right way? You don't have to know how to do all that, promise. But you do have to make sure that it gets done. And making sure you know how, and check out some of the other videos on the channel on how to talk to and how to interview bankers, attorneys, accountants, insurance people to make sure that they're the right fit for you. Especially if you're coming from a blue collar background. I love working with blue collar folks because sometimes they're the smartest people out there, but they may not speak banker or accountant or lawyer. And it's going to be really important that you find somebody who's willing to help translate so that you can understand it. And then once you embrace it and speak their language, you'll do amazing. And I promise this happens more and more. And the very last component is you've got to make sure you do the service, particularly if you're taking things contingent in advance, if you've taken in advance or other components. This is where whatever you do, bend over backwards to blow their socks off. Make it really, really solid. Over-deliver. Under-promise and over-deliver. And when you do that, it's going to start referring other people. But what we've done, though, is we've actually walked through and shown you how to do this with no money. I've done real estate developments, multi-million-dollar real estate developments with almost no money. There's ways to do these things, but you have to be clear on how you're doing it. Make sure you've done your research. You've created some sort of contingency contract or an agreement, found your financing, figured out the right way to build your company, and then actually execute it. When you do that, you can thrive. You can become an amazing solopreneur. So if you have any questions, please don't be afraid of reaching out below. Check out some of the other videos on our channels. And if you have any questions or you'd like to check out our course, please visit us at aspiringsolopreneur.com. Keep smiling.